Hi, everybody. In case you don't know me, I'm Elaine Ubiña, co-founder of Fairfield County Look with my adorable husband, Chi-Chi. Thank you all for coming. You've been great supporters of our Look event series, both live and Zoom for several years now. We are excited to bring you our next live event in mid-July when we are planning a Look travel luncheon to hear about what to expect in luxury travel for 2020 and 2021. Next Monday, the 15th at 5 p.m., we have a very special Look Zoom with BBH, Brown Brothers Harriman. The event is Family Dynamics During Anxious Times. Please stay tuned for an invitation. You'll get one following this with our wrap-up. And the following Monday, the 22nd of June at lunchtime, we're producing a fantastic panel with Greenwich Film Festival on tech and what to expect in the entertainment industry coming up. We are delighted with this wonderful turnout. Thank you all for coming. For many of you, this is the last day of school, and it's a terrific opportunity for us moms to celebrate and to start focusing on other parts of our lives besides homeschooling. So here we go. We are grateful to our sponsors who bring us a way to relax during this crazy COVID time. Mask Skincare features the latest in clean luxury goods for the skin, nourishing CBD infused masks for the face and the eyes. Hemp Garden, our favorite CBD company. We will be offering a 15% discount code, which will be included in our thank you email following this event. And they are included with our quarantine survival kit, which will go to one of our lucky attendees today, along with Broken Shed Vodka and Blade and Bow Whiskey, who are our drink sponsors. So I hope everybody has a cocktail with them because we're going to need one once Demetra gets going. And Tracy, who will calm us all down. Demetra Ganias is the founder of Ganias Media Lab. Demetra Ganias Media Lab is a speech coaching and media training business based here in Greenwich. Ganias Media Lab is a creative space in which Demetra collaborates with clients to put their best self out into the world. You guys are going to love her. Demetra is going to take it from here and introduce Tracy. So thank you all for coming, and I'll let you all take it away.
Thank you everyone for being here today. Elaine, thank you so much to you and to the entire Fairfield County Look family. What a wonderful opportunity today to learn something and better ourselves. Our guest is Tracy Fox, the ultimate advisor in so many ways, an NYU certified coach. She does it all: executive coaching, personal coaching, and lucky for us today, marriage coaching. And Tracy, welcome.
Thank you, Demetra. Happy to be here. And we're talking about my favorite subject, so I'm really excited to dive in.
We are excited too. And I know that what makes you spectacular at what you do is being able to dive in, get to the crux of the problem, and give us these tangible things that we can walk away with to help our situation. So first, tell me the definition of a good marriage. Let's start at the foundation. What makes a good marriage a good one compared to those that aren't?
Well, when I get on a call with a couple, I always say you need to look at it one of two ways. You can look at it as a mathematical formula, which is 1 + 1 = 1. It's the only place in the world where that is true. You cannot look at marriage as 1 + 1 = 2, meaning you do you and I'll do me, and occasionally we'll get together and we'll have kids and we'll sort of do this life. It is the opposite. It is really that you have to become such a team that 1 + 1 really does equal 1. And I think if you start as that foundation, you're better off than most of the people. Another way to look at it, of course, is through a faith-based way. And for those of us that got married in a church or a synagogue, marriage is originating in the Old Testament. A man shall leave his mother and father, cleave to his new wife, and the two shall become one. So it's the same definition of two people becoming one. And it's not just one sexually, it's one recreationally, spiritually, psychologically, in all ways, financially. The ultimate goal of marriage is to become one.
So if I'm somebody who loves my husband, we have a great time together, we raise our kids, we have pretty typical problems. How does quarantine just bring things to another level? I mean, maybe it's just too much of a good thing.
Well, I always say again in coaching that when you squeeze an orange, right, orange juice comes out. So
That's right.
meaning that when you squeeze a marriage and you put all this additional pressure on it, like spending a lot of time together and kids are all in the house and homeschooling, um, certain things will start to come out in your marriage. I actually think that that is a good thing, not a bad thing. And you and I discussed this briefly the other day, but I think of marriage as an opportunity to sort of evolve as a human being. And so your partner often will bring out things in you, but it's not so much that you should have the microscope on him, let's say. You really should get out the mirror and look at yourself. And I do think marriage is a perfect venue for personal evolution. And I give the example, if I'm in an argument with my husband and I'm saying to him, well, you're always late, or something like that, I've got the focus on him. But instead, if I take out the mirror and I say to myself, well, how are you showing up in this moment, even though you might be annoyed with his behavior? Are you being kind? Are you being gentle? Who are you being in this moment? I think it's a great opportunity to really look at yourself and evolve and make your marriage better.
So if we do look at ourselves and we're making those hard decisions about what do I need to do differently, do you think we're really finding what was already there and we just weren't together enough to see it? Or is this situation creating new problems for us?
Well, I think it's both. I mean, we're all products of our environments, how we grew up, role modeling from our own parents. So a lot of that stuff is going to come to the forefront in our own marriage. And of course, new problems arise all the time. But again, one of my philosophies around marriage is that you have to look at it almost like a business. When you have a business, for those of us that do, you have a mission statement around your business and you sit down and you brainstorm about how to be solution oriented about all the issues in your business. And I really am a strong believer that that is how you have to treat your marriage. You have to be sitting down regularly brainstorming about whatever issues there are. And of course, many people don't do that because they're afraid or they don't want to take the time. There's a many reasons people don't dive in and work on their marriages. But if you're not working on your marriage, you are slowly over time separating from your marriage. So you're either contributing and working on it, or you're sliding away from each other. And for those people that are super successful in their marriages, they have a deep interpersonal commitment to constantly be working on their marriage.
So let's say we are working on our marriage, we're trying to talk, but there are so many factors getting in the way. A lot of the questions that we got today from viewers talked about delegating at home. Who's doing the homeschooling? And even now that homeschooling is over, who's making sure that the kids are still reading or doing their math or keeping up, or who's keeping them busy when we might be working as well? How do we keep everybody doing their part so moms don't feel so overwhelmed and in turn angry?
Well, it goes back to what I said about treating it like a business. And I write about it in my book, that I personally believe that the secret to a happy marriage is a weekly meeting where you sit down with your spouse, maybe on a Sunday morning, put the kids in front of a cartoon if they're that young, or send them out the door if they're a little bit older, and have an actual meeting. And in that meeting, you should discuss sort of the 4 top areas of your marriage. 1 is finances, where are we with the money, what's happening, all that good stuff. 2 is the to-do list, which is what you're talking about. Great, this week we've got homeschooling, we've got to clean out the garage, we've got to unload a dishwasher. And you look at it together like 2 adult people and you say, you take that, I'll take this. Brainstorming. Romance is the 3rd subject that I think everybody should be covering regularly. And the 4th one is, of course, parenting, because again, we come from different home lives and we all have different ways of handling kids. But if you can agree and being a parent at the top, you'll have a much more successful home life. So to answer your question, meetings is really important. And the other thing, and let me just say one other thing that I love about meetings, I call it drive-by shootings if people don't have meetings. In other words, if you're not sitting down and really negotiating and going over the different areas of your marriage, what happens is throughout the week, you make little comments here and you give little digs there about either things that didn't get done or you're annoyed or whatever. I call them drive-by shootings. And they really can do a lot of damage to your marriage. Whereas if you sat down on a Sunday and you've agreed together how you're both going to show up and manage the life of your marriage, you're going to be much more successful, and you're also going to be much happier.
Yet that resentment starts to creep up if you don't address it face to face and really give it the time.
Exactly.
So let me ask you about money, because there are two questions that we're hearing about money. The first is, number one, if less money is coming in, how do we sort of deal with that when there's been a huge lifestyle change? And number two, what about the women who are putting aside their work because as more natural nurturers, they're taking over the kid duties, the household duties, and now we're arguing again about I'm not able to earn the money that I normally do. How do we deal with the facets of less money coming in?
Well, the first thing I would say about money, and this always fascinates me, that I go into a lot of people's homes. When I do marriage and family counseling, I'll actually go to people's homes. They like the privacy aspect. And what I'm always fascinated by is when I ask the question, do you really know your money? Whether it's a billionaire or whether it's somebody just making a smaller salary, I would say 90% of people don't know their money. Meaning they don't really, they sort of know it. They know, yeah, I make this and I sort of have these bills over here, but they don't really know it. And I think one of the best things you can do for your marriage is know it within a couple of dollars. Know that, yes, I bring in $100,000, 25 of it goes to taxes, and that's over on this category. And then over in the spend category, I know that our cable bill is $300. Because when you really know your money, you can manage it and it is not managing you. Which goes to your question about when we're bringing in less money, it's not quite so frightening if we really have a working definition of our money, and then we can sit down and say, okay, together we're going to have to find a way to shave off $50,000 because this year because of COVID, and how do you want to do it, and what do you want to give up, and all that good stuff. So again, managing things together, but you can't manage things together if you really don't even have a starting point. So I implore everybody to do that exercise of what do we really bring in, and then what are we really, really spending? And then your second question was?
Yeah, how about us moms, if we have, so much attention that we're giving to kids because we are the go-to nurturer. Our kids might actually say, I want mom and not dad, or dad might not be so willing. What can we say to both our children and our husbands to just get more help, because obviously we're overwhelmed?
Well, again, I think it really does depend on the age of your children, but another thing I am absolutely my philosophy around this is it must happen is family meetings. If you want kids to really change behavior, you want them to weigh in to buy in. So you can't just go around telling kids this, that, and the other thing. You really have to elicit from them their thoughts, because when they weigh in, they're much more likely to buy in. And so if you do a family meeting and you say, listen, mom really does have to work, and I understand you guys need me, but what do you think we could do about it? You will be absolutely surprised what they'll come up with. And when they come up with it, they will do it. And so you get sort of a buy-in and a team effort from everybody. And I also think you'll gain a lot more respect from your kids, who will understand that your work is important and it's valuable. And that's a great life lesson for them anyway. So family meetings, and again, regular family meetings work.
Okay. And I want to touch on the idea of moms doing so much. I mean, let's be honest, a lot of the work at home that we used to outsource, we're doing ourselves. So it's the cooking, it's the cleaning, it is the homeschooling, it's everything else. Cleaning toilets isn't exactly foreplay. How do we feel sexy again when we have so much on our shoulders?
Well, there's that old joke about great foreplay, of course, is your husband doing all the work so you can get in the mood, right? I mean, and unloading a dishwasher is the sexiest thing in the world. But no, separately from that, I do think it's tough. I mean, again, I can only speak from my own personal experience and the coaching I've done. Yes, women need a lot more time to warm up, and they need to not have kids in the house. And it's a completely different ballgame. And so I think if you're trying to feel sexy again, you're going to have to figure out and brainstorm, do we need to go down to the beach and have a cocktail together, and, find a mini babysitter? Do we need to go on vacation as soon as COVID is lifted? I mean, I do think that it's very difficult to feel sexy when you've got all this stuff going on, but I also don't think you should feel badly about it.
So we had a lot of questions about, bringing laughter back and planning these mini date nights. What do you think it is that really makes it a successful meeting? Is it the intimacy? Is it the conversation? Is it just the fact that no one else is around? What is the goal of these date nights? What should we be looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I also believe that so much of marriage, when you're busy with kids, and a lot of people do social life with friends, that you don't get an opportunity for true intimacy. And intimacy is everything from me sharing my deepest emotion all the way to us taking a bath together. But because we live such busy lives, intimacy and busyness cannot coincide. Intimacy comes from having a quiet moment and being vulnerable and opening up either emotionally or physically. And so you have to create that space. And even not COVID, I tell people all this time that you got to slow it down and you have to find time to spend alone with your spouse. Don't always be going out to dinner parties with 10 people, because you don't create, no intimacy is created when you're just sharing information with people. Right? I can share information with the guy at the deli about what kind of sandwich I want. I'm not creating intimacy. Intimacy happens when you open up and you're very vulnerable. So I
The
think
group
that
dinners are fun, but we got to put them aside for this.
Well, every now and again, but I, especially in Fairfield County, there's so many things you're invited to all the time, or maybe that's true everywhere, I don't know, that, when you're constantly on the go with work and parties and racing around and racing here, racing and intimacy do not meet. And so you have to slow it down, both for your own health, but also if you want to have a successful marriage and create intimacy, you have to find time alone together. And it's the most important thing, because if you want your marriage to last the test of time, intimacy is hugely important.
So Tracy, the good news in all of this, I know you're a proponent in not getting divorced, or at least giving it every possible go before. Explain your philosophy a little bit, and then talk about your strategy when it comes to therapy and sessions to make this work.
So my philosophy is you can always get divorced, right? You can get divorced in a week, you can get divorced in a year. Do not get divorced until you've earned that divorce. And the way you earn the divorce is to really go back again and keep giving it another effort, because there's just too much at stake. There's your personal happiness, there's your husband's or spouse's personal happiness. Then you've got these beautiful children in the house who do not want their parents separated. And yes, kids will readjust, and there's that old saying that kids would rather be from a broken home than live in one. I get all of that, but you do want to give it every effort to make your marriage work. And there was a second part to that, sorry.
Yes, do you think that it's the number of sessions that are important? Do you think it's just a matter of really exploring what it is that gets you into trouble in your marriage, or what makes you unhappy? How do you sort of work out your sessions and getting to the root of the problem?
So my coaching is a little bit different than therapy. I dive into therapy because we're always looking at where did we come from and what are we bringing to the table and who were our role models and all that stuff. But I'm all about what is it you really want and how are you going to execute on that vision. So I try to spend much less time in details, problems, and drama, which is where people get into trouble. Going over and over all those things, and really get back to what is it we want to accomplish here and how exactly can we get there. And really, your brain can go to execution mode and solution mode, but many people would much rather stare at the problem and be a right fighter. And if you're really searching for peace, you have to be solution oriented. And so when I coach, I'm all about let's not spend a lot of time together, he said, she said, over and over and over again. You can do that and it can last for years. I think it's much more effective to look at what are we trying to create here. It's a thing of great value marriage. And I say this in my book too. I'm going to go off on a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but I give this idea that how you identify something is how you treat it. So if I come over to your house and I give you an old dusty book, and you say, well, thanks, Tracy, and you whip it up into your attic, that's how you're going to treat it. It's an old dusty book. But if I call you up and say, no, look a little more closely, and you see it's a first edition Hemingway, All of a sudden, you get that book out of the attic, you dust it off, you put it on your mantle, you care for it like it's the greatest gift in the world. You tell all your friends it's the most amazing thing. I say that exact metaphor is great for marriage. Start identifying your marriage as sacred, as something set apart, as something that's so meaningful because it's a place where you create safety. It's a sanctuary for your family. And when you identify it like that, you start to treat it like that. You wouldn't let anything get in the way. You would go on that vacation. You'd say to your friends, no, I need a night with my husband. You would do all the things to protect it. And, you know, there's a great poem, I'm not going to read it, but it was in the article, and I think it says it perfectly. It's all about the reason a marriage can be great is because you make it so and you protect it. And I wish more people would think of their marriages that way. Because as soon as people get into trouble, they're like, well, okay, fine, we'll just get divorced. And they start, you know, and they start threatening that, and they do that whole thing. And, you know, down the rabbit hole we go. So back to how you identify something is how you treat it, and speak about it that way. Speak about it as the most valuable thing in your life, because it is.
It sounds like really putting your ego aside is one of the big factors, especially in the 1 + 1 = 1, because we might be inclined to say, well, what about me? What about if we're feeling needy? How can we put the ego aside and get our needs met? Not in a form of just feeling like we're the only one that matters.
Well, agreed. I mean, you have to have a spouse that's willing to sit and also review their own behavior as well. And again, back to 1 + 1. If my husband has an anger issue, I've got an anger issue. If I've got an arrogance issue, my husband has an arrogance issue. And I like to look at it that way, because then we sit down together. I'm not pointing the finger the whole time saying, no, it's because you're angry all the time, or he's pointing at me saying, well, if you weren't so arrogant all the time. We're sitting down saying, yeah, you're right. I have, you know, you need humility. Absolutely. Going back to your point, to have a great marriage, you have to be willing to look at your own stuff. And I think humility is a piece of that. And yeah, being a right fighter does not work in marriage for sure. You have to be a team player.
What are some words we can say to our spouse if they're not so inclined to help, so inclined to talk about going to therapy or to talk in the family meetings? What if you're beyond a point of anger where you're not even getting the other half to show up? I think sometimes that's the biggest issue. So if we want to have meetings, if we want to have intimacy, if we want to go to therapy, what can we say to sort of convince someone who isn't there yet mentally or emotionally?
Well, no one's going to like me saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Often I find with men that they are not willing to change a lot of the time, and I know there's an exception to the rule for sure, but men often need more, they like the brainstorming aspect of counseling. And so if you can sort of put it in that light, like, look, we're not going, of course, once you get there, you are going to be discussing feelings and intimacy. But many men tell me when they hear that off the top, they don't want to go because they feel like they're going to get dragged into some very long, involved area where they can't get to fixing it. And men love to fix things. Again, I know there's exceptions to the rule, so I'm not trying to put everyone in this category. But if you can put it more in, it's going to be more strategy, and we're going to be really looking at things. I think you'll find, in terms of men anyway, a lot more openness to be willing to do that. I don't know if you were speaking of spouses in general or men in general when you asked that question about, you know, trying to get your partner. But I think it goes back to what do we really, you know, what's the end goal here? And if we're not both willing to show up and do the work, you know, what else is there? And especially when you have a family and you have children, just, you know, look at your kids. And
right. So when we think about, you know, moving on from this phase of quarantine, is there anything that you think we really need to keep from this time? I know obviously the focus inward and inside the four walls of our house has actually been really beneficial. I mean, I know personally my kids have seen more of their father in the last 3 months than maybe in the last 6-7 years of their lives. I know there's a bond there that has formed. So I'd like that to stay. But is there anything from your perspective, from the couples engaging with each other or their kids, that you really hope sticks around?
So yes, I think this has been an incredibly special time. I said last time, and someone asked me before COVID if I could have any dream in the world. I said to have my whole family under one roof again, and then voila, you know, unfortunately because of COVID, but I did get that. And I do think many people feel that way. This has been such a special time for families. And the thing that I would like to stick around is everybody needs, including myself, needs to stop being so reactionary. We get up and we just start the day and we race off, and then we react to things all day long. I think this has shown us that we can have an absolute incredible opportunity to start to design the life we want. And so back to the example you're giving, you know, maybe it's time to sit down and say, is this the life we want, where, you know, you have such an amazing job, but you're gone a lot of the time? Is there a way that we could brainstorm together about, is there a way that you're home more, or you're spending more time with the kids, or whatever it is? I think that this is a great time to leave COVID as we go back out and look at it as the time to be really mission oriented and design the life we want. We don't always just have to jump on the treadmill and get right back to it. Sit down and say, what is the life we really want? What kind of family do we want? What kind of home do we want? And, you know, another chapter in my book is all about creating a mission statement for your family. Businesses do it all the time, same thing. What do we want our family unit to be about? Laughter and fun and togetherness and all that, and then figure out how you're actually going to accomplish that goal. So being intentional about your marriage and your family life.
Yeah, what a beautiful idea to say design your life. I think so many times we just feel like, well, we have to go to that event. Our kids have to do these 3 activities each. We have to do the things that we were doing before. What's a sort of take back statement or a mantra that we can say to ourselves or to our spouse to say, okay, you and I are going to be the architects of this plan going forward. How do we do that?
How do you say it, or how do you do it?
How do we say it so that we do it? How do we commit to it and make the promise and actually follow through?
I would say, listen, next date night, bring your piece of paper, because we're not going to a fancy restaurant. We're going to the beach, and we'll get a large glass of wine or whatever we like, soda. And we are going to write a mission statement for the next year. What do we really want this to look like? Because if we want to have more sex, and we want to spend more time with our kids, and we want to not be so frazzled, we can do that. But if we don't intentionally design it that way, it's definitely not going to happen. And it's a fun thing to do. There's nothing more interesting and powerful than designing your own life and not just feeling like you have to do something because it's in front of you. And that is especially true, again, of people who have high-powered jobs. I work with a lot of executives, and they always say to me, all the time they say to me, you don't know how busy I am. I can't get home at 6 o'clock or blah, blah, blah. And then I say to them, let me ask you something. If your son was sick, and the only way he was going to get his medication was if you got home at 6 o'clock, would you be able to get home at 6 o'clock? And of course they say, absolutely, I would be home at 6 o'clock. And I say, well, what's the difference? The only difference is they're not setting it as a priority, right? And so again, is your marriage and your family life your top priority, or is it not? And that is the question everyone has to ask themselves.
And it really is, you know, we can't get our friends to give us the advice that's going to help our marriage. In fact, I don't think anybody is very truthful about what's going on in their marriage. It's something we kind of gloss over. So we're not having those honest conversations perhaps as much as we need to, correct?
I agree. I mean, you and I talked about this briefly. Statistically, the divorce rate is close to 50%. I mean, it varies year to year and which statistic, you know, you look at, but it's hovering right around there. So think about that. Think about all the people who either walk down an aisle or go to City Hall. They're super excited. Nobody thinks their marriage is going to end in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. So 50% of those people are ending up divorced. There's probably another 25% who stay together reluctantly or very unhappily due to finances, or they don't get along, or they're doing it for the sake of the children. That leaves a very small percentage of people who are really designing great marriages. And it's not that they don't want to. I think they're just not being super intentional about it. And of course, there's a small percentage of people who get into trouble because of a lot of reasons that can't be solved, like I'm making it sound so easily. There's addiction and there's abuse and all those things. So I'm taking that category out. But I do think for most of us, we can really put our marriages back in the rightful place of being first and foremost. You know, Mother Teresa said something very interesting, and it's one of my favorite quotes. She's, you know, going back to all of us are out there trying to change the world and do everything. She said, if you really want to change the world, just go home and love your family. And it's a very profound statement because she's right. If we would just go home and create peace and harmony in our own homes, then we send everyone back out into the world as peacekeepers, and then you really do change the world. So I think if we would get family and marriage back in first place, everything else would fall from that easily.
And you touched on something, Tracy, that we can't discuss marriage in quarantine without touching on, and that is a possible abusive spouse. Obviously, everybody being closed inside means that we might be near the person that is most harmful or most dangerous to us a lot more often than we used to be. So what do you say to someone who finds themselves in a dangerous situation that they feel really just locked into?
So I am not a specialist on any level on this subject, so take this with a grain of salt. But yes, those people need a lot of support. And often they're too afraid to reach out. They're too afraid to do anything. And so if I'm speaking to someone who is in that situation, try to find the courage to reach out to someone, whether it's a friend or calling an abuse hotline, because they have said domestic violence is up dramatically because of COVID. So I think a lot of people probably are in that situation. And again, not a specialist on this, but if you as a friend think somebody's in a tough situation, then definitely reach out to them and just check in on them. Maybe you don't bring it up, but if they're not ready to talk, but I think just staying close would be a really thoughtful and important thing for you to do.
And of course, we know here in town that the YWCA has domestic services that are here at our fingertips, and we want everyone to know that all of that, COVID or not, is still available, that the services that your town or your city provides is absolutely still there despite whatever difficulties we're going through. And I want you to just, again, paint a picture for me, Tracy, of a mom who is running around with her kids, trying to keep the house clean, trying to cook, trying to do everything. Give me your parting advice to her, or paint a picture to her of the evening when she can put aside what's making her upset, angry, tired, and invest in herself, invest in her marriage, and go ahead, put on something better than the athleisure workout clothes you're in, order in dinner, and just try to have that connection to someone who's just so exhausted. Paint the picture of the right thing to do.
I think the right thing to do is advocate for yourself. And I do think many of us, especially with all that's going on, we tend to be perfectionists. We are trying to keep the house clean and put out the perfect dinner. I think perfection is not something we want to strive for at all. You know, progress, not perfection. Can I just get one thing done today correctly? Maybe it's make a lasagna and the house is not neat and maybe the kids didn't get all their homeschooling done, but so be it. Because I do think that the higher calling should be peace and happiness, not efficiency, not getting everything done, not having a clean house. It should be a happy home. And I think if everybody just looks at it that way, for all you moms out there and busy women, then what's going to make you happy? Right? So maybe you have to eat on the floor. Maybe you have to say to the kids, I'm going to take a Calgon bath. You know, that old commercial, take me away, right? You know, because moms are actually the heart of the home most of the time, exceptions to the rule. Yeah. And so you've got to take care of yourself. And if that means you need to go take a bath, or you need your husband to come give you a foot massage, or you need the kids to make dinner, that's what it is. So take care of yourself first, and then worry about everybody else afterwards.
I have one last question to ask. And in the meantime, if anyone else has any questions to ask, you can type them in. I will be looking at them briefly after I ask you this last question, Tracy. We asked, you know, tell women something that they need to know. What about the men at home who are watching women keep it together? We're doing our best. What can they say or do? If they say, okay, I know I need to be supportive, but how? Paint the picture for them about the right thing to say or do, or something that will really help them connect.
So my best advice for men is called validation. Men want to fix things, or they want to make things okay. This is my best example, and I share it all the time. One of my great fears, I don't like flying. I get really nervous when I get on a plane. Now, if I'm driving to the airport and my husband says to me, "Oh, that is nonsense. Get over it. Planes never crash." He and I are having an argument, right? Because he's now he's trying to, just say it's nonsense. If he does the opposite and he's like, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay." That's also not helping me because he's not validating what I'm going through. What I need him to say is, "Wow, you poor thing. That must be really tough to have to get on a plane for the next 4 hours when you actually feel afraid." I really understand that. I don't agree with it, but I totally understand it. All of a sudden, we're teammates, right? He's getting me. And I think if men would validate their wives, whatever it is, "Honey, you seem exhausted. Are you exhausted?" "Yes, I am." "Okay, great. I'm hearing that you're exhausted. Why don't you sit down and let me unload the dishwasher and get the kids dinner?" Whatever it is, validate what is happening. You talk about creating intimacy. That is the quickest way to do it. And we all want to be validated and we want to feel good about whatever we're experiencing. So you don't have to agree, but you have to validate.
It's amazing how a little acknowledgement totally changes our perspective on whoever we're around, let alone the husband that we're, inside with all the time.
Right, exactly.
Okay. So is there anything that you can tell us about how best to reach you? If people want a session, if they want to learn more, tell us about the best way to contact you.
So everything is on my website, and I like people to go to my website because I have a lot of testimonials there, and that is important only because obviously if you don't know me, you're not going to trust that, maybe you want to work with me. But I think the testimonials say it all, and it also explains all the work I've done. I have written several books. One of them is called Happy Self, which is all about how to really start with yourself. And then I just, brought it to show the Happy Marriage Handbook. I did it as workbooks. So again, if you don't want to go to counseling, and you want to try something on your own, these are workbooks. So you each do a chapter at a time, you come together and you discuss the answers, and it's kind of fun. And you go through each one, maybe you do it over the course of 10 weeks. So that's fun too. You can just always reach out to me at tracyfox.net. So the website is .net, not .com.
Awesome. Thank you for differentiating. And I want to just throw one more question at you. If we know our husband is going to say something that's going to escalate us, and we can feel that a conversation is turning into an argument, how do we stop it in its tracks? Because if we get the sense that, okay, this is not going where I want it to, what word do we use to make them hear us rather than just keep going back and forth?
Again, big believer in this concept. I call it the redo, right? So you have to be able to learn to redo situations. And I think if you use humor, this works a lot. And again, I want to show it to you somewhere else so you all know what I'm talking about. I came home one day with a bunch of groceries and all my kids were on the couch. And I walked in, I said, "Hey kids, how you doing?" And they said, "Hey mom." And they all just kept staring at the TV. And I said, no, oh, whoa, everybody. I said, "We're actually going to do a redo." And they're like, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "I'm going to leave with all the groceries. I'm actually going to come back in, but this is how I want you to do it." And they're all laughing at me like I'm crazy. And I said, "You're going to turn the clicker to off. You're going to stand up. You're going to walk to the door and you're going to say, 'Hey mom, you've got groceries. Can we help you?'" So I wasn't just telling them how to behave. I was showing them how to behave. And I think we need to do that for each other in marriage too. We get into these conversations where we show up and we do the exact same thing all the time. And that's a way to disrupt it. And so maybe say to your spouse, "Listen, let's have a deal where when we get into these situations that become heated, let's try the redo. Let's try some humor. You can say to me, 'Hey, can we redo that?' And actually leave the room, come back in and try it differently." So if the first time you said, "Oh my God, you didn't unload the dishwasher," and your husband says to you, "Redo," you walk back out, you come back in and you say, "Darling, I adore you. Is there any chance you would unload that dishwasher?" Or whatever. And have some fun with it. People take marriage way too seriously. Learn to have fun. But I like the redo because it's not just telling each other what we need. It's actually showing each other what we need. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's amazing what a few words that you change can really change the scenario entirely with the other person.
Absolutely. And when you behave your way to success, you get there much more quickly.
Excellent. And I like the humor because we need to have a little bit of that. Otherwise, we're going to be in dire straits.
We need a lot of
especially in
humor.
this situation. Tracy Fox, thank you so much. All of your nuggets of wisdom are written down and they are recorded. And for everybody watching at home, if you want to see this again, or if you'd like to share it with someone, it's going to live on the Fairfield County Look YouTube channel. So plenty of opportunities to come back, watch it again, and share it with everyone you know.
Thanks, Demetra, for everything. Thank you, Tracy. This was fantastic.
Thank you, Elaine.
Thanks
Good job,
for
everyone.
coming, everybody.
Thank you so much.
We'll be in touch soon.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.